Hello and welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to play with some text special effects inside of Photoshop. As you can see, I've got an image that is finished open on my screen, and I'm going to show you how to create this effect as well as a couple of others inside of Photoshop. So I'm just going to clear away some of my layers here. I'm going to start with a fresh canvas. So just open up Photoshop and start with a white canvas. Just create a new file. And the first thing to create is basic text. So if you click T on your keyboard, that will open up the text tool, or you can click over here with this little guy here, and it gives you a few options. Any of the tools, you'll notice that if you hold down your mouse button, when you click on them, if they have a little arrow, they'll show you some options beside them. So you can make vertical text, horizontal text, or text with a mask, which I'm not going to get into in this video. Okay, so for this purpose, we're going to do horizontal text, which is the regular type. Okay, and you can do text two ways. You can either just click on your image and start typing, or you can drag a box. So if you drag a box, it just makes it fit within that shape. So I don't want to have any restraints. I'm just going to click here, and I'm going to type, let's just put text. Okay, so now as you can see, something has gone wrong because we don't see any text. So if you open up your character panel, if it's not open already, I have mine set up so that it's on my set of tools on my desktop. If it is not open already, just go up to your Windows menu and click on character. Okay, and you will get this little panel showing up here that shows you the font that you're using, and oh look, the color. So the color white obviously is the same color as the background, so we need to fix that. So let's change our text to black, and now it shows up. Once you have your text placed, you can also see that it's off position, so you can move it around. Click V, which is the move tool, V for Victor. You can then grab your text and move it anywhere you like. Okay, you can also use the paragraph panel. Again, if it's not open, go to your Windows menu to decide whether you want your text left defined, center justified, or right justified. Obviously, if I'm just doing one line of text, it's not going to make a difference. But if I make 2 lines of text, and I just activated that by double clicking, let's just call it line 2. Okay, now when we center or left justify, you can see what happens. So you get to decide how you want to line up your text with any rows that you have. Okay. The other thing that you can do with your text, I'm just going to center it for now, is change the font. Okay, you can do that on your characters panel, or you should be able to do it up at the top. As long as you have your text tool selected, so T again on your keyboard, you should be able to change the font up at the top here, okay? The size, okay? You can also change the alignment here. And you can do things like warp it, okay? So warp is kind of fun if you want to make things like an arc, okay? It does stretch your text though, okay? So there are other ways that you can distort text and make it go around shapes. I'm not going to get into that either. It's a little bit more involved with paths and so on, okay? But if you want to create your text in a shape, which we'll do a bit later with the flag image, you can use the warp. Okay, so let's pick a text that's nice and thick. So when you're doing text that you want to do effects on, especially when you show an image through, things like that, you want to make sure you have a nice bold one so that the lines are very thick. Okay, and let's make this go with an image. So first of all, let's change our text to something that is more appropriate. Let's change it to text effects. Okay, now I'm hitting Command Return to apply that and change it to the layer. Okay, you can also change the spacing between the letters. Okay, this one here, if you grab it and drag it to the left, makes less space. You can see them squishing together, or spreads them out. Okay, so you decide how close together you want the letters. This little slider here, if you set it to auto, it will generally set the same number of whatever you have for your font size as the spacing as well. So if you want a little bit less space, okay, see our text size is, let's just make it 500. Okay, so let's make our spacing size 450 and see what that does. Okay, so it gives a little bit less space in between. So then you can decide if you want less space and have them overlap, or you want to have a little bit more space and have your lines separated more. So you can play with the spacing sideways and up and down with these two controls right here. Okay. So now what we're going to do is add a layer style. So these are some really basic text effects. So you can add a layer style by bringing up the panel. So just click on the layer itself. So not on the words or not on the thumbnail, but just click on the actual layer here and you'll bring up the layer style dialog box. Inside of here you have several options. You can do things like fade it out, so you want your text faded. You can add a drop shadow, right? You can change the color of it. Let's make a nice purple one. Okay, you can move it around, change the fade, all kinds of things. Okay, so these are some fairly basic text type of effects. You can add a stroke. Okay, one thing I will mention about adding a stroke, it basically adds an outline to your text. Okay, be careful of how you apply it. So you can apply it to the outside of the text, right? And I'll show you what happens when we make it a little bit bigger. When you apply it to the outside of the text, it actually rounds the corners. Okay? Okay, so see how the corners are kind of rounded on that? If you apply it to the inside, it keeps your corners nice and square, but whatever you're applying it to, it comes in a little bit on that item. So whether it's an image or your text. Okay? I like to apply it on the inside. Okay, so you can do some funky drop shadows and things. You can even apply a texture inside of your text, things like this. So if you create a pattern, you can fade it out. Okay. So now we've got some really funky text happening, right? But that's not really custom to our image. So if you want to make text that is a little bit more like the effect that I showed at the beginning, you have to use your own image, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so let's get rid of some of these effects here. So we're just gonna zero these out, get rid of these guys, we don't want that. Okay, so we're gonna start by choosing an image. You can do that a couple of different ways. You can go to the File menu and choose Place Embed, right? Or you can just find the image that you want, right? So I'm using a Mac, so it's in my Mac Finder. So you can find the image that you want. I'm going to use a Cuban image here. Let's pick a nice one of a car. Okay, the flag is the one I showed in the example, so let's do that one. And literally just drag it over onto your image. Now the cool thing about doing that is it automatically sets it up as transform. So you can move it into position and change the size. Hold down the Shift key to keep the dimensions the same, because otherwise you'll stretch it. Okay, so stretch it to the nice size you want. Hit Enter. Okay, so now it fills the screen, but we can't see our text anymore. Okay, so the really cool thing about this is, watch how quickly this happens. Okay, so we want to add a clipping mask to this layer. Okay, and the easiest way to do that is to hover your mouse over the layer until you get the little hand. Okay, hold down your Alt or your Option key. Okay, so I'm kind of pointing at the area between the two layers, and you'll see this little down arrow happen. Just click, and it creates a clipping mask. Now, boom, look what happened. So now what happens is the image that I just placed on the page, the Cuban flag, only shows where the text is. Okay. So we can still turn things like our stroke on and the drop shadow, right? If we want to have those. Of course, they don't really fit, so we want to adjust them, right? Let's go back to a black one. And let's do black stroke as well. Okay, so there's a really simple way to get the image to show up. Now, if you want to see something really cool, watch what happens when we move our text around. So I'm hitting the V key to get the move tool activated again. You can see it with the little arrows. When I grab my text, watch what happens. The image stays where it is, and the text shows whatever image is on top of that area. Pretty cool, right? We can also enlarge our text if we decide we want to make it even bigger. Let's fill the screen with it. Change our spacing again, of course. Right, now we've got something that fills the screen. Right? Now the words don't really fit. So the word that I used before, of course, was Cuba, because it's a Cuban flag. So let's do that. And I'm going to do it in all caps. Right. Move it back to the center. Let's make our text a little bigger. You can use this to make your text only so big. It will only go up to, I think it's 1296. If I try and type in 13 pixels, you see what happens. It won't let me go any bigger than 1296. So if I try and type in something that's really large, it won't let me. However, you can get past that by using the transform tool. I think 1,000 is going to be big enough. Okay, so let's say we like 1,000, but I want it to be a little taller. Right? So we can either stretch the letters by entering a number in here, which is the height of the text, and stretch it, right, which works pretty well. That's a little too much. It's all a game of trial and error. That's what Photoshop is all about. So you try something, you see what works, you try something else. I'm going to try the spacing a little bit closer together, and this font is not bad. Okay, so let's try something like that. Okay. Now the neat thing about, remember I showed you the warp tool before as part of the characters, right? Warp text. Now we can make it into a flag, flying the flag. Well, let's try this one. That's a little bit better. And being that it is an image of a flag, that's fairly appropriate, right? So now we've got our flag flying in the wind with the Cuban flag coming through our text. Okay. Didn't take very long, right? We didn't have to do any cutting things out. All done for you with the clipping mask of this image. Right? Now the cool thing is we can add to this effect if we'd like to make a different background other than white. So let's go back to our Cuban flag image and duplicate the layer. So by doing Command or Control J, we'll duplicate the layer. Right? You see a brand new layer. I'm going to drag it underneath the text. Okay? So now you can see that there is sort of the magic text that we created on top of the flag image, but let's fade it out a little bit. So let's turn our layer opacity down to about 30%. Okay? So now we kind of have the faded out flag in the background with the full color flag inside of the letters. And of course you can play with your effects. I tend to like bevel and emboss myself, so I like to do that one, something like that. Gives it a little bit more 3D effect, right? So if you're happy with that, we're done. If you want to take it one step farther, let's say you really like this effect and it's something that you're going to use on a recurring basis. You can actually change out the image fairly easily. Now there's a couple of ways to do that. There's we can just place another image, right? So I can go back to my Finder window and just grab another image. So I mean, the Cuban cars are fairly iconic, so let's try this guy. Okay, now you'll notice that it's got fairly small. Let's make it a little bigger. And it's still showing me the flag. So let's turn that layer off. And we need to add our clipping mask to this guy to get their text to show up. And there we go. So we might decide we don't like distort on this one, so we're going to unwarp, go back to regular, and now maybe we want our text a little bigger. Beautiful. Okay. So let's do the same again with our image of our car. I'm going to duplicate the layer, Command or Control J, put it underneath. Now notice the flag images are still there. I haven't gotten rid of them. I've just turned them off. Right? So I'm going to change the opacity of this layer when you have your move tool selected and you have your layer highlighted, you can actually just hit the keyboard. So if I want 30% opacity, I'm just going to hit 3, okay, and it does it automatically for me. You see that up here, okay? Or else you can pull the slider down here. Maybe let's go 40% on this one. Maybe even 50. Okay, so let's go 50%. I like that. Now the neat thing you can do is you can apply effect to the background layer, and I'm going to turn it into black and white. So I'm going to apply an adjustment layer, black and white. Okay, you can play with the sliders and adjust the tone of it, but for this purpose you can do that later. But now the background faded out image is a nice black and white. Pretty cool, right? Let's take it a step farther. Right. Let's add one more, and let's add a photo filter. And I want to give it a really antique look, so I'm going to add the sepia filter. Okay, so what this does is it just kind of applies a tone across the whole image. If I go to 100%, you'll see what it's doing. It's applying this yellow tone to the whole image. So it's kind of like a brown tone or a sepia tone image. Okay. Make sure you leave preserve luminosity checked off, because otherwise it gets a little flat looking and you lose your highlights. Okay? So you can make it as vibrant as you like in terms of the sepia. So there we have a sepia image in the background, a color image coming through on the letters, and the words showing up, the name Cuba. Okay, so that's the first way to change the image. The other way to change the image is a little more complex. You need to save an image out ahead of time, which I have done. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of our flag layers because we're done with those. Now at any time you can save this as a PSD, so just do a save and it will come up and it'll ask you what kind of format you want to save it as. If you save it as a Photoshop document, it will keep your layers for you. Okay, so I'm going to save it as text overlay with image. Okay, and what it will do is it'll allow you to come back and edit those layers at any time. Okay, once you close it and come back later, you won't have the history like you do now, and you can undo some steps, but you will still have the layers. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to set up changing the image out automatically. Okay, so what I've done is I've created an image called text/image. Okay, so I'm going to drag that one in. Okay, and it's going to do the same thing. We're going to place it where we want it. Size it the right size. Hopefully it fits. And then of course put it up here. Create our clipping mask. Okay. And make sure we turn off the other layers that we don't want. Okay, so the cool thing about doing that is that when you have it named as your image that your what did I call it, text/image, when you do a drag and drop, it does it as a smart object automatically. So if I just click on this little thumbnail for the image that I just placed, it will actually open it up. Okay, now the neat thing about that is I can place another one over top by using embed, or do the same thing, drag another one over top just like I did. So let's say I want to replace it with, oh, let's find a good one, something different. I like this guy. Okay, so let's say I don't like the car, like this guy driving. Let's replace it. Okay. So now this one looks like it's a little bit a different shape, so we're gonna have to transform it to fit. Okay. Hit enter. Right. So I'm gonna flatten it, save it. So I'm just hitting Command S. Now watch what happens when I close this one. Oops, I didn't transform enough. When I close this one, it's going to go back to my other one and it's going to automatically update. So see, the new image that I just changed is already in the text. Let's try it one more time. Okay, so I'm going to click on the Smart Object thumbnail, double click it. There's my image. I'm going to go grab a different one. Let's make one really different. Let's try the dancers. Right, so you'll really be able to see that it's different. Right, perfect. We hit enter, flatten, save, and close, and there we have our dancers. Okay, so obviously we've got a problem with the text overlay, so you can move that around and size it because the guy's losing his face. So that may not be the best choice, or we can just position it until we get them in the shot. Okay, you can also move your images around. Okay, so by moving the image, the text stays where it is and the image moves. Just make sure you don't go off the edge because you're getting the black showing up. It means we'll run out of image there. Okay? So we can do something like that. So there you have it. You have a really cool way of adding some images. Right? You can even combine the two techniques. Let's say we want to add our flag in the background of our little dancers here. I can do that. Remember, drag it down below, underneath. Oops, drag it underneath. And remember, fade it out. So now we get the Cuba flag with our dancers, and we can change out that image at the top at any time. Right? Remember, we just have to go pick a different one. Let's say we like our car again. That's probably going to work well. Sometimes the images you choose aren't going to work as well. Okay, so you have to play around with the right images. Now notice this one doesn't fit because it's a different proportion. Looks like I've cropped it a little bit. But let's see what happens when I save it out. Save it, close it. Because I'm not showing the top and the bottom there. It looks pretty good. So we can move that around a little bit. Yeah, we're running out of image there. Make sure we get the front. Beautiful. So you can really play around with your opacities. You can change that one back to black and white again, and make some really cool effects. I wouldn't do this on a lot of things, but if you're making a poster or you want to do something funky for your Facebook page or your Instagram, this will give you a few techniques in your arsenal to play around with adding text inside of Photoshop. Have a great day. Keep playing with Photoshop and keep practicing your photography, and we'll see you again next time.